With concerns over egg shortages throughout the nation, as well as skyrocketing egg prices, many are taking the leap into backyard chickens. But are they really worth it? In this video, I'll be going into some detail about the cost of raising chickens and how much a dozen homegrown eggs cost to produce. We first got into chickens about 12 years ago. We took a break for a few years while we lived in town, and then we've had them for about 6 years straight now. Before I start, I want to stress that there are lots of variables to these numbers. You can start off with a fancy pre-built coop, all new equipment, and keep your older chickens as pets, and you'll end up spending thousands of dollars a year on your chickens. Or you can make do with what you already have, build or find something free to use as a coop, let your chickens forage for part of their feed, cull birds that aren't laying well, and even sell eggs or chicks to reduce costs or make money from your flock. You'll have to research feed prices in your area and plug in your own numbers to get a better idea of how much eggs are going to cost for you. Besides eggs, chickens are good for bug control. We let our chickens free range whenever we have a problem with grasshoppers in our garden. We don't actually let them in the garden because they will dig up the plants, but we let them free range around the outside of the garden, and they will make quick work of the grasshoppers. They're also great for garden prep. Right now we have some of our chickens in chicken tractors that are right over the top of future garden sites. So they're clearing the ground and scratching it up. I probably won't have to even till those areas because the chickens are doing it for me. And finally, they're a great compost source. We get lots of chicken poop that can be recycled into fresh vegetables for your family. Probably the biggest expense with chickens is going to be your coop. You can buy a pre-built coop, or you could use a barn stall, refurbish a tool shed, you can build something from scratch. And if you live in a mild enough climate, you could even use a chicken tractor or a chickasha type of thing. There are more videos on YouTube that show you how to build those yourself. We live in zone 5, so it gets down to about -20. So in the wintertime, at least, we want all of our chickens in a solid enclosure. And that also works better for us because we have so many predators out here. You'll need nest boxes and roosts. If you decide to fence in your chickens, then you'll need some fencing supplies. We keep most of our chickens fenced in, first because of predators. They tend to disappear pretty quickly when they're free ranging. And then also because they can really do a number on the garden and the landscaping. So on a normal basis, we keep them fenced in either in our main coop or in different chicken tractors that we move around the property to fresh grass. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. So you'll probably need lights and a timer if you want to keep your chickens on lights in the winter and increase their laying. And then you may need a water heater depending on where you live. Even though we live in zone 5, so we can get to -20 or below, I usually don't use a water heater. I've just had so many problems with keeping the electricity going, and the ice freezes up over the cords and shorts it out. So I actually just keep a tub of water rather than a fancy chicken water. For the wintertime, I just keep a tub out that I can dump and refill when it freezes. Or in the morning, I'll just come out and pour some boiling water over the top of it to thaw the top of that. And finally, if you're starting with chicks, you will need a brooder setup for those. We actually have a backyard chicken supplies checklist page on our website, so I'll post a link to that in the description. That gives you a detailed list of everything that you're going to need to get started with chickens, whether you start with adult birds or with chicks. And there are actually 2 lists on there. There's one that you can download and it's just a checklist, and then there's another one that is for the supplies on Amazon. So when you're starting with chickens, you can start with chicks, which typically cost $3 to $10 a piece. You're going to need a brooder setup to keep them at 95 degrees when they're little, and then you'll reduce the temperature on those chicks little by little as they get older. You'll have to feed them to maturity. So they're going to end up needing more care at first and more feed. On the other hand, you could start with pullets that are typically 2 to 3 months old. So that would be a young female that's old enough. She doesn't really need lights or any special care, but she's going to cost more. Pullets usually sell for $15 to $30 a piece. Let's see. So I'm going to go into feed now. The lighter weight breeds, you can expect them to eat about 1/4 pound of commercial feed per day if they also have access to some bugs and kitchen scraps. If they're only on commercial feed, I'd say 1/3 pound for the average size chicken. For us, I go with that 1/4 pound number typically. There are times of the year where I am able to supply more of their food from the garden or from compost piles or free ranging. But typically I go with the 1/4 pound of feed per bird per day number. So that's 90 pounds per year per bird. They'll also need some calcium. My numbers on feed have changed. If you've watched any of my previous videos where I've mentioned our costs for chicken feed. I used to get it for $11 for a 50-pound bag. It has gone up and up and up. That was just 3 years ago. I was getting it for $11. Now we're paying $32 for the cheapest non-GMO feed we can get in our area. So you'll have to do the research in your area and find out what the type of feed you want to give your birds is going to cost. But at that $32 number plus a little bit more for calcium, that costs $70 per year per chicken for feed. And I also allow $5 per year per bird for replacement costs. So that figures in that you're going to replace your laying hens every 3 years. So that comes to $75 per year per hen. A good laying breed will lay 240 eggs or 20 dozen eggs per year. You can look up the number of eggs your breed is expected to lay, usually on the hatchery websites or online. Sometimes the feed stores will give you that information too. I found that usually in a backyard chicken setup, you're not going to reach those ideal numbers. But if you do stick with the higher laying breeds, 240 eggs a year is a good average for a mixed flock like what I have here. So if those 20 dozen eggs are costing you $75 a year, that comes to $3.75 a dozen. The roosters are having a competition here. So $3.75 a dozen at those numbers. This is for non-GMO. If you want to go with certified organic, that's going to cost more. Conventional, you might be able to find for cheaper. So for us, I would be paying $6 a dozen in the store if I didn't have my own eggs. So even though $3.75 sounds like a lot, I'm still saving $2.25 per dozen at those numbers. And multiply that by a couple dozen hens, and that's a lot of money that I'm saving each year. There are a lot of ways that you can reduce your feed costs. I already mentioned free ranging or growing their feed. We grow a lot of sunflower seeds for our chickens that are high in protein. If you're able to, you can grow grain, winter squash. You can feed them weeds. If you have a dairy animal, they can drink some milk. They'll eat fresh alfalfa. You can grow worms or insects for them. You can do a compost system like what you're looking at here. There are actually some farms that feed their chickens entirely off compost and don't buy grain, but you're going to need a very large quantity of compost to do that. This size pile makes a dent in how much grain they eat as they're picking through it and getting the bugs. But I still need to feed quite a bit of grain. Something else you can do with the composting system is to throw whole grains in there. That encourages the chickens to dig and helps them to find the worms and bugs. And then any grains that they don't eat don't go to waste. They get sprouted, and then the chickens can have access to the fresh green sprouted grains. Field peas is something else that you can grow for your chickens that's really high in protein. The most important thing if you're growing some of your chicken feed is to keep the protein content consistent. It pretty much needs to be in the 15% to 18% range. So your chicken feed can be made up of a lot of different things as long as you keep that protein consistent. Some more ways to cut costs are to sell eggs, hatching eggs, chicks, or pullets. This is something that we do every year that makes a big difference in our feed bill. For example, if you had 11 hens and 1 rooster, so 12 chickens total, and you were getting 220 dozen eggs per year, your feed replacement cost was $900, so that's going with the $32 per bag non-GMO feed price. And then you're selling 4 batches of 25 chicks for $5 each. That's $500. So subtracting the $500 you made from the $900 in feed costs, and now your feed is just going to cost $400. So that gets you down to, I think I wrote $1.80. I can't read my handwriting here on my notes. $1.80 per dozen compared to $4.09. $4.09 is higher than the $3.75 because I factored in feeding a rooster as well. So like I said, that can really bring down your feed costs. A lot of times we sell enough hatching eggs, chicks, and pullets to pay for half of our feed. We've never actually made money at it, but you could if you wanted to. Something else you can do is to recycle your old hens into stew meat or bone broth. They're also good for canning or frying, anything where they're cooked for a long time, because that tenderizes the tough older bird. So, are chickens really worth it? It all depends on your goals. For us, we're able to get feed costs down much lower by growing some of our chicken feed, doing the compost system, using chicken tractors or rotating pasture in our main coop, and then by selling some of our chicken products. We also want to be less dependent on the grocery store, so for us it would be worth it even if we were paying more for chicken feed. So there you have it. That is our chicken cost breakdown. If you missed those numbers, we figure $75 per year per hen for feed and replacement costs. And if we're getting 20 dozen eggs per year, that brings the eggs to $3.75 a dozen. And that was for a 1/4 pound of commercial feed. So that assumes that they're getting a little bit of bugs and some kitchen scraps and stuff, but mostly commercial food for their diet.